All right, so imagine this. You're sitting at your computer. You're about to send some money to Indonesia. You got to pay that supplier, right? So you do a quick Google search. What's the exchange rate today? Boom, Rupiah is doing great. 8,170.65 to the dollar. Sweet. You hit send, and uh-oh, big problem. That rate, totally bogus.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, this really happened. February 1st, 2025. People all over are checking Google, seeing the Rupiah, like, through the roof. I mean, talk about confusion.
I'd be freaking out a little. Like, did I just win the lottery or something?
Right. But no lottery win this time. More like a Google glitch. And not just a small oopsie. We're talking a major blunder. Headlines in the Indonesian news, Bank Indonesia, their central bank, they had to issue statements and everything. Even Google themselves had to jump in and explain.
So that's what we're diving into today, a full-on financial detective situation. We've got all these news reports, statements from Bank Indonesia, Google trying to clear things up. Plus, we've got some expert insights too. Lukman, Leong and Ariston Tjendra, both super knowledgeable about the Indonesian financial scene.
And we're going to break it all down, not just the how, but also, the why. Why does this even matter? Why should anyone care? Especially in this day and age, right? We rely on this digital information for pretty much everything.
Okay, so let's rewind. Back to February 1st. You open up Google, you see that 8,170.65 Rupiah to the dollar. I don't know about you, but I'd be doing a double take.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's almost double the actual rate because Bank Indonesia, they had it listed at 16,340.30 on that same day.
Whoa, so not just a rounding error.
Nope, definitely not. And Bank Indonesia had to come out and say, hey, everybody, Google's got it wrong. Hold your horses.
And they even said they were working with Google to fix it.
Yeah.
But how does that kind of mistake even happen? With Google of all places.
Right. Well, Google admitted they got the bad data from a third party. Think of it this way. Google's a huge library, but sometimes they have to borrow books from other libraries. Those are the third party sources.
Okay, makes sense. So it's like a chain of trust that, broke.
Yeah, pretty spectacularly in this case. And financial expert Lukman Leong, he pointed out that Google's had these data slip-ups before, but this one was pretty massive.
Right, because of how far off it was.
Exactly. And another expert, Ariston Tjendra, he thinks, maybe it was just a calculation error, Google accidentally cut the real rate in half or something.
Wow, a tiny mistake with potentially huge consequences.
Yeah, and that's what both experts were worried about, People making big financial decisions based on this bad data. Imagine some business owner wiring a ton of money based on that. Inflated Rupiah value. Oof.
Yeah, not good. So to be clear, the real closing rate on January 31st was 16,305. And the Rupiah had been kind of up and down against the dollar in January, but no crazy jumps or anything like that.
Right, just normal market stuff. Nothing like what Google was showing.
So even though it's just a number on a screen.
Yeah, it can be really misleading.
Makes you think, what else are we trusting online without really checking?
It's a good question to ask ourselves, that's for sure.
And that's actually a perfect segue to what we'll be diving into next.
This whole Rupiah thing might seem isolated, but it points to a much bigger issue. How much do we rely on online information, and how vulnerable are we? That's what we'll be exploring.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
It's easy to just think, oh, that's a weird internet thing and move on.
Yeah.
But this Google glitch is kind of scary when you think about it.
Definitely makes you think twice about, making any big decisions based on something you saw online.
Especially financial decisions.
Oh yeah, big time. This is a wake-up call. Always double check, especially with money stuff. Don't just take one website's word for it.
So then, where do we go? Who can we trust for this kind of information?
Good question. Think reputable places like central banks, so in this case, Bank Indonesia.
Right.
Or, trusted financial news sources, official government websites, that sort of thing.
Okay, so it's that classic saying, trust but verify. Except now it's for the whole internet.
Exactly. And it's not just checking the numbers either. You got to think about, the context. So here, if you looked at how the Rupiah had been doing against the US dollar, recently, you'd see, wait a minute, it didn't just double in value overnight. That doesn't usually happen without some big economic news.
So it's not just, is the data right? But does it make sense?
Right. Does it fit into the bigger picture? And that brings up something else, too. Remember Google said they got the bad data from somewhere else? That third party?
Yeah, they mentioned that.
Well, that's actually really common, not just for Google, but for tons of websites and stuff. Problem is, you're relying on someone else to be accurate, too.
So how do we know if that third party is reliable? Feels kind of like a guessing game.
It is tough. No easy answer there. It takes a little digging, being a bit skeptical. Like, what's the reputation of that data provider? Any track record? Are they transparent about how they get their data?
Sounds like we need to become internet detectives or something.
In a way, yeah. But the main thing is just start by being skeptical of anything you see online. Ask yourself, who's giving me this information? Do they have an agenda? Could there be bias, even if it's unintentional?
That's good advice. And not just for money stuff either, right? Like news articles, social media posts.
Anything, really. Especially now with all the misinformation and all that going around.
Yeah, it feels like we need a whole new skill set to use the internet safely.
Digital literacy boot camp. Haha. We need to know how to, evaluate sources, spot biases, tell what's real from what's fake.
And it's not just to protect ourselves either. It's about our communities, our families.
You got it. That bad information, it can have a ripple effect.
It affects how we see the world, how we vote.
Exactly. So next time you see some crazy headline or a statistic that seems too good to be true, take a second. Think about the source.
Ask those critical questions.
Who's behind this? What's their motivation? Could there be errors?
It's about being informed, yeah, but also informed correctly.
That's it. So this whole Rupiah thing, it might seem small, but it's a big reminder about how important it is to be, digitally literate and to think critically in this digital world.
We've talked about the immediate impact, but what about long term? Could this, erode trust in online information even more?
It's possible, yeah. When a big company like Google messes up, it makes people wonder, can I trust anything I see online?
Makes sense. And that loss of trust, it could affect everything.
Oh, yeah, for sure. From how we shop online to how we learn, how we talk about politics.
So if people stop believing what they see online.
It's almost like the foundation of our digital society starts to crumble.
So how do we prevent that? Is it on companies like Google to be more careful? Or is it on us to just be more skeptical?
It's got to be both, I think. Companies definitely need to step up their data verification, all that, be more transparent about where their info comes from. But we've got a role to play too. We need to be smarter about what we believe. Use those critical thinking skills we were talking about.
So it's a team effort, basically.
For sure. And it goes beyond just technical skills. It's media literacy, critical thinking, even ethics, How do we use and share information online responsibly?
It's almost like we need a whole new code of conduct for the internet.
That's a really interesting idea, especially as our lives get more and more digital.
So where do we go from here? How do we actually fix this problem?
That's the big question, right? And it's a tough one, no easy answers. But I think if we start by being more digitally literate, encouraging open conversations, between companies and users, and holding ourselves and each other accountable for the information we're sharing, that's a good start.
A long road ahead, but it sounds like a necessary one.
Totally agree. And it's a journey we got to take together.
All right, so we've talked about the how and the why of this Google Rupiah mess. But the big takeaway here is, the so what. What does this tell us about online information in general?
It's a wake-up call. It shows that even the big guys can make mistakes. And those mistakes, they can have real consequences.
It's not just a virtual problem.
Exactly. So we have to think critically.
Question what we see. Verify before we do anything.
And we all need to get better at this digital literacy stuff.
It's essential for navigating the internet these days.
Sure.
We've talked about being more discerning online, but are there any tools or resources that can help with that?
Oh yeah, there are actually a lot of fact-checking websites, organizations that focus on debunking fake news like Snopes, factcheck.org, PolitiFact. They do deep dives on those viral claims and stories you see.
Okay, so that's good for checking specific stuff. But what about judging, the credibility of a source overall?
There are tools for that too. Media bias charts. They show you the political leanings and the factual reliability of different news outlets. There are a couple good ones from Adfontes Media and All Sides.
So you can see if there might be bias.
And you can try to get information from different perspectives.
That's helpful. So there's a whole world of resources to help us out.
Yeah, and it's always changing, as new challenges pop up. It's important to stay informed about them.
Well, this has been a really interesting look at online information and all of the things we got to watch out for. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. This whole thing started with, a currency mix-up. But it kind of makes you wonder, what else are we just blindly trusting online?
Right. It's a bit unsettling when you think about it.
I mean, we saw how easily that financial data got messed up. But what about, health information?
Yeah, or stuff that affects how we vote.
Exactly. Or even just, our understanding of how the world works.
It's a good question. Because the same problems that happen with the rupiah, they could be happening in all sorts of other areas.
So it's not just about money, it's bigger than that.
Oh, yeah, much bigger. Think about medical information, political polls, even scientific research.
All this data flying around, shaping how we see things.
And we're making decisions based on it every single day.
It's like we're all in this giant online experiment.
Yeah.
And we don't even know if we can trust the results.
And the stakes are pretty high. What if you're using bad medical information to make decisions about your health?
Or imagine voting based on a poll that was, like, totally manipulated.
That's a scary thought.
It is. So we can't just sit back and passively take in all this information.
We gotta be more active, more questioning.
Yeah, like, critical thinking is key here.
Couldn't agree more. So the next time you see something online, a statistic, a news story, whatever, and you're like, wait, is that really true? That's when those critical thinking skills come in.
So what should we be doing? What are those skills?
Well, first, question the source. Where is this information coming from?
Right, because anyone can post anything online these days.
Exactly. Then look at the context. Does this information make sense given what else you know about the topic?
And don't just rely on one source, right?
Definitely not. Look for evidence from other places. See if other reputable sources are saying the same thing.
It's like being an internet detective.
Uh-huh. Yeah, kinda. But the main thing is, don't be afraid to dig a little deeper.
Because there's so much information out there these days.
Knowing how to sort the true from the false, that's a superpower.
Well said. So, to wrap things up, we started with this Google Rupiah situation. But we ended up talking about something much bigger. The importance of critical thinking in our digital world. And the responsibility we all have to be informed, but informed correctly.
It's about questioning, verifying, and not just taking things at face value.
Because the internet can be an amazing tool, but it's up to us to use it wisely.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep learning.
And on that note, that's a wrap for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.